Hello, I'm John Benton, and this is an NCAA tournament preview. What did the ACC Player of the Year, the nation's leading scorer, an Austrian freshman standout, and a 6th seed dancing for the first time in 22 years all have in common? They all play in the South Regional. A quick note before we get started. I will be using 4 stats prevalently from KenPom.com, a college basketball analyticals website run by Ken Pomeroy. 3 are adjusted offense, adjusted defense, and adjusted tempo, which measure how well a team would perform offensively and defensively, as well as how many possessions they would average per game against an average Division I team. The 4th stat is the luck rating, which is essentially a percentage of how many close games and blowouts a team wins or loses. The more close the wins and the more blowout losses they have, the luckier the team. In the South Regional, we start with the number 1 seed, the Duke Blue Devils. This might be the most notorious basketball program in all the NCAA. This year's iteration of the Blue Devils went 29-4 and will be making their 20th straight NCAA tournament appearance. The coach with the most wins all time in the NCAA, Coach Mike Krzyzewski, is looking to avenge last year's upset loss to Mercer in the first round. As the number 1 seed, they're unlikely to be upset, but they want to make it all the way this year because they're led by the ACC Player of the Year and projected number 1 overall draft pick, the freshman Jahlil Okafor. They're number 3 in adjusted offense this year per KenPom. So what's the Blue Devils' kryptonite this year? Well, they have questionable defense, and that might hurt them against a lot of teams in this tournament. Whether they're going to be coming out of the South Regional or not is up for time to decide. Who the Blue Devils will be facing in the first round is also up for time to decide, as it'll be a play-in game between the North Florida Ospreys and the Robert Morris Colonials. We'll start with the Ospreys. They went 23-11 out of the Atlantic Sun Conference, and they'll be making their first ever tournament appearance, much like Buffalo and UC Irvine. Not only that, but the Ospreys are going to be the only team in Florida to make the tournament. Out of all the talent in Florida, including the Gators, the Miami Hurricanes, the Florida State Seminoles, and the only team in the entire state to make the tournament was North Florida. Anyway, the Ospreys are led by the leading scorer, point guard Dallas Moore, and earlier in the season they won at Purdue, then a huge upset, and still a big upset as Purdue ended up blossoming into a tournament team out of the Big Ten. Also in the recent weeks, North Florida has become very famous for the band member Stephen Putnam, whose exploits on the sidelines and his status as a super fan have actually done well enough to earn him a scholarship and major news coverage. Putnam's going to be rooting his Ospreys on against the Robert Morris Colonials, who went 19-14 out of the Northeast Conference for their first tournament appearance since 2010. Back in that 2010 tournament, as a 15 seed, they took 2nd-seeded Villanova to overtime, where the Wildcats eventually got past the Colonials. This year's Colonials are slightly less talented, but they're still led by a very talented junior guard named Rodney Pryor. And of note for the Colonials, they're 13th in the NCAA in steals per game. If they're able to get to Duke, they're going to have to try to pickpocket point guard Tyus Jones. Moving on to the 8th seed in the South Regional, it's the San Diego State Aztecs out of the Mountain West Conference. They went 26-8 and ended up winning share of the Mountain West regular season title this year for the 4th time in the last 5 years. In those last 5 years, they've made 5 straight tournament appearances, which means this Aztec team is having unprecedented success currently under former Michigan coach Steve Fisher. This year's Aztecs possess the 4th best defense per possession in the NCAA per KenPom, and they play at a very slow pace, very much like Northern Iowa and like Virginia. Of note, forward Dwayne Poley too is going to be back for this tournament. He returned late in the Mountain West tournament. Poley back in December collapsed on the court. It was a very scary situation, but he is back now and hopefully he's completely healthy. So he and the rest of the Aztecs are looking for a very fruitful tournament run here. But standing in their way is the New York City-based St. John's Red Storm out of the Big East Conference. They went 21-11 this year, and they'll be making their first appearance since 2011. This year's Red Red Storm is led by volume scorer D'Angelo Harrison, who more often than not is scoring. St. John's underwent a mid-season meltdown between late December and early February, where they lost 6 of 8. However, they were able to salvage their season with a subsequent run of 7 wins out of 8 games, which has led to St. John's being very comfortable in the field. However, unfortunate news broke before the tournament that their big man and prevalent shot blocker Chris Obekba will not be eligible to play until the Final Four if the Red Storm make it that far due to a violation of team rules, which is really going to put a damper on the Red Storm. Moving on, we have the 4th seed in the South Regional, the Georgetown Hoyas out of the Big East Conference. The Washington, D.C. area Hoyas went 21-10 this year, and they'll be making their first tournament appearance since 2013 after a slight blip last year. In their last 5 tournaments, dating back to their Final Four appearance in 2007, they've lost a double-digit seeds each time, culminating in 2013's upset loss to 15th-seeded Florida Gulf Coast. The Georgetown Hoyas under coach John Thompson III runs the Princeton offense, which emphasizes ball movement, and this year combo guard Devonta Smith-Rivera has been the perfect man to run it. Watch out for Georgetown this year. Looking to continue Georgetown's run of futility against double-digit seeds in the NCAA tournament is going to be the Eastern Washington Eagles out of the Big Sky Conference. The Eagles went 26-8, and they'll be making their first tournament appearance since 2004 and their second ever. Eastern Washington, which is notable for its football team having a red field. Side fact, Boise State with the blue field and Eastern Washington with the red field are both in the tournament, which is kind of funny. This year's Eagles have a very prolific offense, which has led them all the way to the tournament. This Eagles offense is led by the nation's leading scorer, junior guard Tyler Harvey. Harvey's been kind of a rags to riches story. He walked on to Eastern Washington's basketball team as he was unable to receive any Division I scholarship offers due to being undersized out of high school. However, of course, he's went on to lead the nation in scoring and become an NBA draft prospect, and he single-handedly put Eastern Washington into the field of 68 in the NCAA tournament. If there's anything that's going to let Eastern Washington down against Georgetown, and if they advance, it's going to be their defense. It's the second worst in the tournament per possession, only ahead of the Lafayette Leopards. We move on to the 5 seed here in the South Regional, the Utah Utes. The Utes out of the Pac-12 this year went 24-8 for their first tournament appearance since 2009. They'll be looking for their first run to the Final Four since their title game appearance all the way back in 1998. The running Utes this year are led by the senior combo guard and leading scorer DeLon Wright, who is a major candidate for All-American first team in the NCAA. They also possess the Austrian freshman center Jakob Poeltl, who is a very prominent shot blocker, one of the best in the NCAA, and he's also gathered a lot of NBA draft hype. The Utes run the 18th most efficient offense, and they've also possessed the 8th most efficient defense. And much like Virginia, Northern Iowa, etc., they are very slow-paced. So expect some low possession games from this Utes team. Playing the Utes this year, though, will be the Stephen F. Austin Lumberjacks out of the Southland Conference. They went 29-4 this year, and last year as a 12 seed, they pulled the overtime upset win over Virginia Commonwealth, and this year they're a 12 seed against a 5 seed. Do the math, and they're being picked by many to beat Utah. The Lumberjacks are led by the Southland Player of the Year, junior guard Thomas Walkup, and their coach Brad Underwood, who is in his second season as a head coach at the Division I level. He is 61-7 in his career currently, which is one of the best records for coaching his first 2 years in NCAA men's basketball history. Next up here in the South Regional, we have the Iowa State Cyclones out of the Big 12. The Cyclones went 25-8 this past year, and they will be making their 4th straight NCAA tournament appearance. They won the Big 12 Conference Tournament for the 2nd straight year, and they have improved every year under coach Fred Hoiberg since Hoiberg has taken the reins at Ames. And this is due to the fact that graduation doesn't really hurt the Cyclones too much, due to Hoiberg's superb ability to gather elite transfers. The Cyclones this year possess the number 7 adjusted offense and the 15th fastest adjusted pace per KenPom. Iowa State this year, led by junior forward George Niang and guard Monte Morris, are certainly play an exciting brand of basketball. Matching up against Iowa State will be the Blazers of Alabama at Birmingham. UAB went 19-15 this year to make their first appearance since 2011 in the NCAA tournament, and this was the first time that UAB actually won their conference tournament since back in 1987. UAB made a Cinderella run through Conference USA, earning a bid over some powerhouse teams such as Old Dominion, Louisiana Tech, and Texas El Paso, who all made names for themselves nationally. This year's UAB Blazers are led by the junior guard Robert Brown, who is their only player in double-digit points this year. I'm not sure if anything's going to really ease UAB students' sting over the discontinuation of the football team, but maybe an upset over Iowa State would go a long ways to helping, and I'm sure this tournament appearance doesn't hurt either. We move on to the 6th seed in the South Regional, where we have the Southern Methodist Mustangs out of the American Athletic Conference. SMU went 27-6 this year for their first tournament appearance since all the way back in 1993. And in fact, this is going to be the first tournament appearance for Hall of Fame coach Larry Brown since the 1998 Miracle Jayhawks of Kansas, led by Danny Manning. Of course, Larry Brown coached in the NBA for a long time. That is why that fact is a fact. This year's SMU Mustangs are led by American Athletic Conference Player of the Year Nick Moore. Also really boosting their odds ever since a 2-3 start to the year has been the return of forward Marcus Kennedy, who was ruled academically ineligible for the first semester. However, all is not well in Dallas. Keith Frazier, one of the SMU's starters, was ruled academically ineligible in January, and they're currently being investigated by the NCAA as well, which very possibly spells bad news for SMU. But for now, SMU fans and students can celebrate their basketball team being back in the big dance for the first time since many of the students on this team were born. Playing Southern Methodist in the first round is going to be the 11th seeded UCLA Bruins. UCLA, who has the most championships in NCAA basketball history, with 2013 this year, and they'll be making their third straight appearance out of the Pac-12. However, this year's UCLA Bruins team has been a huge surprise, being selected to the tournament. They were seen as a huge long shot. And it's even more surprising that they don't have to play in the first four, instead being replaced by a team in Dayton who is widely expected to get an 8 or 9 seed. Over the course of the offseason, UCLA lost 3 NBA first-round picks due to early draft entrants, but they've been buoyed by the strong play of senior shooting guard Norman Powell, beastly big man Kevon Looney, and the sharp-shooting point guard Bryce Alford, who happens to be the son of head coach Steve Alford. UCLA, an 11 seed for UCLA, may not be exactly the most illustrious position in the tournament, but it's not bad for a team that had 7 points after the first half against Kentucky. Next up in the South Regional is the number 2 seed out of the West Coast Conference, the 32-2 Gonzaga Bulldogs. Everybody's favorite mid-major is going to be making their 17th straight NCAA appearance, but they're going to be seeking their first Elite 8 berth since 1999, which was the first of those 17 straight appearances. The Zags have crashed out of the tournament early and often over the last decade and a half, but this year's prolific offense is willing to change that. This year's offense is 6th in the NCAA in adjusted offense, and it's led by West Coast Conference Player of the Year Kevin Pangos, 3-point specialist Gary Bell Jr., Polish big man Szymek Karnowski, and their leading scorer, the Kentucky transfer Kyle Wilcher. Playing the Zags are going to be the North Dakota State Bison out of the Summit League. The Bison went 23-9, and they'll be making their second straight appearance in the tournament. However, last year they made it as a 12 seed, and a very experienced one at that, and they were able to upset the 5th-seeded Oklahoma Sooners. They lost a ton of talent from that team, but the major player they retained was forward Lawrence Alexander, who has gone on to lead the team in scoring, and he was named the Summit League Player of the Year for his efforts. Coach David Richmond was also named the Summit League Coach of the Year, and this North Dakota State Bison has overachieved so far, so what's saying that they can't overachieve a little bit more and really give the Zags a run for their money? Next up, we got the 7th seed out of the South, the Iowa Hawkeyes out of the Big Ten. The Hawkeyes went 21-11. They'll be making their second straight appearance. This year's team possesses a balanced offense led by senior power forward Aaron White. Last year's Iowa Hawkeyes team really melted down at the end of the year, but this year's team has done the complete opposite. Instead of backing their way into a first 4 loss, this year's team has managed to get a 7 seed by winning their final 6 regular season games before bowing out in the conference tournament against Penn State. Iowa's first round opponent will be the Davidson Wildcats, who hit 24-7 in the Atlantic 10 this year. The Wildcats will be making their first NCAA tournament appearance since 2013. Back in 2008, as a 10 seed, the Davidson Wildcats made a run to the Elite Eight, which was, of course, fueled by the current NBA superstar Stephen Curry. And this year's Wildcats have also been playing a Cinderella story. The highly selective liberal arts score was picked to finish 12th in the Atlantic 10 out of 14 teams. This being Davidson's first year, they had to earn it, and they certainly did. They shocked everybody by winning the regular season conference title by a full game. They were led by Atlantic 10 Player of the Year Tyler Kalinowski and slashing point guard Jack Gibbs. For his role in the team's surprising success, longtime coach Bob McKillop was bestowed upon the award for Atlantic 10 Coach of the Year. If you haven't seen them, check out my previews for the Midwest, East, and West regionals.